Keen. So we have all these kind of fun titles. The best one, I think, is when I was a seminarian, and a friend of mine, Father Marshall Vang, would send me letters addressed to the very nearly Reverend. I thought that was great. Killer sense of humor. Seminarian, the very nearly Reverend. I described it about right.
Well, it's actually like the Germans do in titles. It's Herr Professor Doctor or Frau Professor Doctor for the academics. So you've got the gender in there,
right,
the title, and the degree. It's kind of curious.
Sure, English is a funny language, so we don't do that very well in English. So. And as it says in E2, the word presbyter literally means elder. So, so to say a Presbyterian church, if the word Episcopal means what? Do you remember what that is? Bishop, right? So the original title of our church was the Protestant Episcopal Church of the United States of America, which means we're the Protestant church with bishops, right? Where does the word Presbyterian come from then? What is the governing council, the authority in the Presbyterian church? They have a council of elders, which is the Greek word for Presbyterian is elder, or presbytery. So that's where they get that from. Whereas we would claim that the presbytery, meaning elder, is also a word for priest. That's where the derivation for the word priest comes from. Okay, Charles, you got the bonus one this week. You got all the reading. Okay, go ahead.
Canon law. A. Canons set boundaries of what is allowable, that is, canon of scriptures. B. Canon law is the church's own law regarding what behaviors are accepted, according to the church's doctrine and discipline. 1. The church has no authority to legislate anything contrary to scripture. 2. Canons are adaptable to dioceses and parishes within a broad framework.
Okay, so I could have brought down today, I didn't even think of it, but there are canons, there are books of the canons of the Episcopal Church, the canons and constitution, how the church is governed, and then there are canons and constitutions for how the diocese is administered. A canon. Canon's a Greek word, means measuring rule or a stick.
Oh, okay.
So it says that the canon is the canon of Scripture means which books are official and which books are not. So it's what's out of bounds and what's in bounds. I had a wonderful conversation with a retired bishop who was an old gentleman type fellow, and he told me that one of the great problems with the church today is that bishops aren't gentlemen anymore. He said one of the big differences between the Roman Catholic Church and the Anglican Church has always been that we didn't need a whole lot of canons because people had good sense not to do things that would offend each other. And so you said you had the scriptures and everybody had a pretty universal interpretation of scripture, and then the canons were just, you know, how you cross the T's and dot the I's. Compared to the Roman Church, if you go to the Roman Code of Canon Law, I mean, it's a monstrous, you know, series that gives rules and laws for, you know, how to tie your shoe on the third Tuesday in Septuagesima. I mean, very specific. And Anglican canons, as the church has become more and more fractured over time, especially when the interpretation of Scripture has been questioned, we've had to become a much more canonical, we've had to lean more and more on canons, on written rules about how the church works. And believe me, there's been many a discussion in the past where people have proposed things that have been not in canon because everybody understood that they were in Scripture, they were forbidden. And so we've had to first write a canon that says that you can't do that, and then eventually we changed the canon that says that you can do that. And so some of this has to do with human sexuality. Nobody would have ever thought to put in a canon that you must be living according to the biblical standard of one man and one woman in holy matrimony. But when it became a problem and people started doing that anyway, contrary to that anyway, then they had to make a canon. And now we voted in our convention to add words into it that says that you also can't discriminate according to sexual identity and sexual... what's the word? Identification, that's the word. Sexual identification and...
Preference.
No, preference wasn't in there. It was
Expression?
Expression. Gender expression, that's what it is. So anyway, so that's one of the issues as the church has been pulled from its mooring points and is trying to find its way back to do that, is that it's begun to have to become more legislative in ways that have not been helpful. And more importantly, we cannot as a church legislate contrary to Scripture. If we lose that basic foundation, you will often hear people berate the Roman Church for the doctrine of infallibility. And what the Roman doctrine of infallibility says is that the pontiff, the head of the Roman Church, the Bishop of Rome, can declare something as infallible, as necessary for belief, that is a part of the deposit of faith. In other words, it has to be something that the Church has already believed and believed for centuries, because it's true. He can then elevate that one doctrine to be a dogma. This is true without question. Okay, that's the papal doctrine of infallibility. He speaks not of himself, but as the representation of the unity of the Church. The Episcopal Church, our ultimate authority, is General Convention. And General Convention can vote that the sky is green, and by a majority, that could be written into our canons. It sounds ridiculous, but it could happen. And 50 years ago, I think of Henry Porter Baldwin, the founder of this parish, was the delegate to General Convention, well, every year that this parish existed, from 58 through his death in 92, but he was also a delegate to General Convention, 1858. He was also a delegate to General Convention when he was at another parish in the diocese before he founded this one. And the thought, I think, of them passing a legislation that we pass now would just beyond belief, that we would have these sort of unbiblical, uncanonical things that people bring up and they pass. So anyway, we live in interesting times, right? Instead of the old curse, may God grant you to live in interesting times, right? All right, so let's figure out how the Church works.
Basic unit of the Church. A congregation or parish, although parish is technically a geographic area, being ministered to by the priest, elder, or presbyter, and deacon.
Okay. Although we use the word parish, the parish is an old expression that was a geographic area. And again, just referring to a difference between us and the Roman Church still has parish boundaries. You are actually free now, in recent changes in canon law, you are free to join a parish that isn't in your boundaries. But in the old days, you were in a parish, that was and you hear a little bit of that, some of that in Louisiana, right? They have neighborhoods, the election wards are called parishes. St. Bernard's Parish and things like that. The same idea, it's a geographic area. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
What is a parish? It's a local church, a congregation of Christ's body, under the care of a priest or rector, from the Latin rex, meaning king or director, financial responsibility to a vestry, a board of elected laymen and laywomen.
Okay, so the rex, the word rector comes from the word rex. I'm the king of the parish. I wish that had a lot more glory than it sounds. But whenever I've said that to a couple of priests and said, why don't we emphasize that more? They said probably because the word rector sounds more like a part of somebody's body. And perhaps we need to be reminded of that more often. So there it is. Keep us humble. All right, and obviously we have something called a vestry. Every year we elect 3 members, 4 members, who serve a 3-year term. They have ultimately the financial responsibility. What's that?
Over 5.
It's a 3-year term, 4 people, and we elect them to the board, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the money is being spent as it is supposed to be spent according to the Episcopal Church and state and national laws. But the vestry does more than just that. They also have a responsibility for spiritual direction of the parish as well. They're the leaders of the parish, and so we don't just talk about money. We talk about direction and needs and programs and things like that. But the bare minimum thing that a vestry is required is that. What is the highest elected layperson in a parish on the vestry is the senior warden. The senior warden is responsible for the care of the parish in the absence of a parish priest. If I am incapacitated, I guess